So you probably have heard the big news. President Tinubu has launched a brand new Federal Ministry of Livestock Development along with a special committee to help get it up and running. The goal we hear is to tackle those stubborn food security issues and finally bring some peace to the long-standing farmers' headers crisis as we know it.
This sector will boost agricultural productivity, enhance export opportunities, and stimulate economic growth by fostering a robust value chain that benefits farmers, processors, herders, distributors, and consumers alike.
Well, but as you can imagine, not everyone is excited about this move. There are questions, there are concerns, and even some controversies around it. So let's get some answers. Join me as I sit down with Ajurin Galali, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, to get some answers to the questions and possibly get to the bottom of what this new ministry really means for Nigeria. Mr. Galali, thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
We also want to hear from you, our viewers. You can join the conversation right now on X using hashtag Beyond 100 Days. Remember to tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye. Share your thoughts, ask your questions, and let's get the conversation started. Mr. Galali, I'm sure you're following the debates the creation of this new ministry has sparked. How does the presidency respond to criticisms that this ministry is unnecessary and that it merely duplicates existing functions of the Ministry of Agriculture, under which it could have been a department?
Thank you very much. So we first have to understand, the nuances of the existing architecture of, the federal civil service, right? The fact of the matter is we've seen some of the headlines. Some headlines framing it in the context of the Aronsai report, for example, essentially suggesting that this runs against the spirit of government rationalization and streamlining. And of course, you've now alluded to that in your intro. So dealing with that, essentially you have a situation in the civil service now where we are paying many, many civil servants to essentially conduct part-time work, right? Because we're dealing with decades-long recruitment processes that were essentially based on kind of who you know, not based on any kind of proper recruitment process. And obviously, the immediate fix would be to get into some mass retrenchment exercise, but obviously at a time of economic difficulty, that is not an option on the table of government at the moment to begin harming families that are benefiting from public service salary income. So where we are now is we're saying that in order to maximize the human resource that we have within the civil service of the Federation, the best thing to do is to ensure that we enhance specialization, right? So that instead of having one mega ministry that's dealing with several different portfolios, and you have essentially one minister, sometimes two, looking over what could be 3 or 4 different ministries potentially. We're now saying that if we have specificity, we have specialization, what that will now do is that, public servants or civil servants who, had been up until now doing essentially part-time work because there's just not that much to be done. When you enhance the specialization and you give them, a particular focus area to drive, what you're now doing is, without inflating the bureaucracy and hiring a whole bunch of more people, what you're doing is you're leveraging on the existing overflow, right, of personnel, and you're essentially just reapplying that personnel to a very specific assignment. And we believe that that's administrative sagacity on the part of His Excellency President Bola Tinubu, despite, right, I think, some of the uninformed criticism around the idea that we're now going to have to go and hire a new set of people that would make up a ministry, which is obviously difficult.
So it sounds like you're saying you're using the same manpower and the same structures on ground. It brings to mind the fact that the previous administration had a similar initiative, the National Livestock Transformation Plan. And some have said if it's effectively implemented, it will solve the problem of the farmer-herder clashes by modernizing the livestock industry. Why jettison that plan instead of leverage on its existing structures?
Well, again, this comes down to, I think, a public analysis that is not based on an understanding of the actual realities on the ground. Someone can issue a policy document and launch it and you know, get people around a table and suggest that this is the way to go. It's another thing entirely to actually implement the policy that you've designed. I don't know that anyone is going to be able to point to a process of implementation of the policy that you've just cited. In fact, as I recall from my time in President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, there was the National Livestock Transformation Plan, and then there was also an alternative plan seeking to do something similar but in a different way in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. And as I recall it, the ability to get the states in NEC to be able to buy in, I think was a bit of a challenge. And I think what ended up happening, if you recall with me, was that we had some state governors, particularly within the Middle Belt at the time, right, which is the food basket, where we saw a lot of the real, the worst of kind of the farmers herdsmen clashes. We heard from some of their state governors essentially trying to politicize the implementation of the program and essentially try to forestall it from being implemented. So that was another major challenge. So it's not just about any prior executive administration, it's also about kind of state-level buy-in, right, when it comes to those programs as to why they weren't effectively implemented at the time. And I think because it was also coming up during an election cycle, I think what also happened was people played politics with it, and they felt that they could generate, you know, ethnic propaganda against a Fulani president at the time by drumming on that issue, and then obviously inflaming public sentiment against the idea of a livestock transformation plan. Now, that's the backdrop. Now, where are we is the question. And where we are, two different things. One is that His Excellency President Bola Tinubu of course, established the Presidential Committee on Livestock Reforms. Not only did he do that, but he is now chairing the committee himself, and he is also appointed as the deputy chairman of the committee, Professor Atahiru Jega, who everyone knows is not a member of the All Progressives Congress. He's not a political gladiator, and he's someone who is an academician, who has had experience in the public sector, who is known for his integrity, frankly. And so where we now are is we have a committee set up of experts, of pastoralists, of non-government actors, as well as government actors. And we're confident that the outcome of the work of that committee will ultimately inform the reforms that will be driven by the institutional governance structure that's been created by the president in the form of the Federal Ministry of Livestock Development. And again, I want to emphasize this. I think there's a need for us to recognize that when we talk about livestock development, and we talk about the president's drive and governance innovation to now specialize on that and ensure that we have people focused only on that issue and on the allied industries that will result from it. Obviously, you're thinking of dairy, and you're thinking of many other industries that will come out of animal husbandry, including the leather industry and many, many others. This is the right way to go.
I hear you. These conversations have been held within the context of the current economic challenges. And some people have raised concerns about how the number of ministries, has increased significantly relative to previous administrations under the Tinubu presidency. The expectation is such that government should be looking for ways to cut costs. How does government justify the additional cost of governance that is being envisaged? You talked about, using the same workforce, but you also have to acknowledge that some new structures will have to come into play here. What measures are also being taken to ensure that this new ministry is as efficient?
Well, I think it's worth. I think we can dispute the notion that because you have a new ministry, that now means that you have to create an entire new, allocation, I guess, or not allocation, because of course it's going to have its own independent allocation. But the idea that that's not going to result from, for example, a reduction in its former ministry, right? So if you take the mandate, that subsector out of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, for example, it stands to reason that the budget of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is likely not going to be the same, right? So you would imagine that there's some sort of resource sharing between those two. Then in addition to that, let's also be clear about the fact that there is tremendous international interest in the Nigerian animal husbandry industry and ecosystem. And I think what we are looking at is not merely chopping up the federal budget into small bits and trying to make it work. What we're focused on is saying, look, if we do what we're supposed to do and we enhance specialization and we, design the policy roadmap to ensure that this is a sector that's going to work in the interest of everybody, the farmers, the herders, large-scale industry, micro and small and medium-scale industry, that if we bring the states together and they're all keyed in, that we're going to now be in a position to engage with international technical partners and investors to be able to bring the capital and simply provide the enabling environment for them to actually capitalize the implementation of the policy roadmap that we're rolling out. So for us, the president is an out-of-the-box thinker. He's not someone who's limited by what has been done before. He's looking at solutions that have never been, attempted in Nigeria and bringing them to bear. He did it in Lagos. He's doing it at the federal level today. So it's not going to be a matter of just budgeted resources finding a new batch of budgetary resources to essentially plant somewhere. It's also going to be a resource sharing kind of mechanism between the two ministries, understanding that the responsibilities have changed, while positioning the new ministry to be an enabler of ultimately private sector capital to make the plan work. The last point I want to make on this is, and you touched on kind of cost of governance, which is very important to the administration of President Bola Tinubu, we have already more or less finished the work on the reforms with respect to the implementation or partial implementation. I think the full paper will come out in due course, but we're already at kind of the advanced stages of that process, and I think very soon there will be some kind of public announcement to that effect with some level of detail. But obviously, this process is not just an executive process, right? When you're talking about rationalizing agencies and making sure that you're doing it in a way that does not harm Nigerian families, but in a way that enhances specialization within the ministries, makes best use of our human and monetary resources, then obviously you're going to be dealing with the National Assembly. So there's going to be a process. Now that the executive branch has done what it needs to do, it goes to the National Assembly where laws will be repealed, amended, and obviously that's where ultimately the rationalization is going to be fully implemented.
I'm hearing that we have to let you go, but let me squeeze in a little bit more, especially the questions we've had Nigerians ask. How do you address the potential overlap with the existing agricultural institutions? Precisely, what is this government going to do to address this concern and, ensure smooth coordination between these two ministries?
The proof will be in the pudding, right, Nifemi? I mean, the fact of the matter is, if the president has looked at the ministerial architecture within the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, I can assure you that he's not a man who wakes up and makes a pronouncement. He's meticulous, he's surgical, he's clinical in his approach to governance, and he's done his homework. So he's clearly looked at the architecture, figured out what needs to be removed, what is going to be placed where, and he's going to ensure, obviously, that there's no duality or duplicity or replication of functions or roles. The whole idea, in fact, this is the irony of the whole situation, is that sometimes people will, I think, out of maybe, listening to deliberate misinformation sometimes in public analysis, but sometimes just out of not having the facts and details before them, come to the conclusion that, increasing ministry somehow means that we're bloating the recurrent or that we're just going to explode the cost of governance, when in fact, if there's a detailed understanding of exactly how this process is working, I think people would find that, that this is being done in a way that will not in any way, raise the cost of governance in any meaningful way, particularly in comparison with the benefits that will come from the emergence of a multi-billion-dollar animal husbandry industry that evolves out of an effective policy framework that is driven from a specialized ministry that is dedicated only to livestock development. This is really the focus. And, to public analysts who've mentioned the idea that, oh, you could have made this a department in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, what we say to that is that, yes, you can do that. But what ends up happening, again, is when you're the chief executive officer of a ministry, right, you're overseeing everything, meaning you have everything coming to your table and you have to take decisions across the board on every subsector that is affected by that ministry. Now, if you are able to cut out from top to middle to bottom of a certain segment, a certain subsector of responsibility from that ministry, what you're doing is you're creating the condition for a CEO to be looking at a much more narrow and focused set of functions and responsibilities and mandates and policies that he or she can oversee more effectively and ensure the implementation of. And that's the wisdom of the president. And you can do that without blowing up the cost of governance. That's what the president is doing. And that's what we're going to be very clearly communicating to our people around the country over the next several days. This is in the interest of the country. It's in the interest of the economy. And ultimately, it's in the interest of the implementation of the Renewed Hope agenda for inclusive economic development that actually equates to jobs for the Nigerian people and not just for a segment of the Nigerian elite, as has been the case for so many decades in the country.
If I can squeeze one more in, because this is perhaps one of the biggest...
I'm in a position now where hello?
I can hear you.
Yes, please. I think that the time of the discussion has, as I understand it, has elapsed. I believe the producer has
all right.
told me.
It's all right. There are more burning concerns, but we can let you go if you have to. A big thank you to the SA2.
Yes, I believe the producer. Yes, I believe the producer told me that it's the time for the conversation has come to an end. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, it's all right. Adorin Gilale, thank you so much for talking to us on the program this evening.
Thank you so much.
Well, some indeed argue that the focus of this ministry in and of itself is a big challenge, particularly the fact that it may perpetuate the header-farmer conflicts rather than resolving them. The concern here is such that a ministry focused solely on a livestock development might prioritize the interest of herders over those of farmers, potentially worsening the conflict. And one of the questions we look forward to ask moving forward is the plan that this government has specifically to address these concerns and also ensure peaceful coexistence in that regard. How will the presidency, for instance, ensure that this new ministry also doesn't become a conduit for political patronage and corruption, as some critics fear? These are many questions that have been asked. What are the specific targets, the key performance indicators that Mr. President has set for this ministry, and how will it impact, or how will its impact really, be measured and evaluated? And we look forward to get more time with the president's spokesperson when he has the time to address many of these issues. But that's our show today, everyone. If you miss any part of it, you can catch a repeat broadcast at midnight and again at 6 a.m. tomorrow. From all of us here at TVC News, thank you for watching. I am Nifemi.